Strolling through central London is the man who is trying to drive a coach and horses through the Conservative countryside vote. Ian Gregory has launched a new political party, Rural Reaction.
We're launching the Rural Reaction Party on the 1st of October in central Manchester, right next door to the Conservative Party conference. We'll have at least 200 people there, hopefully more, and it's going to be a real surprise for the Conservative Party. They have not expected to see opposition developing from the countryside to their policies.
Did they think the countryside was just a given?
They've taken for granted. This is a bad marriage. The Conservative Party and the countryside, the marriage has been deteriorating for about 20 years or so, completely ignoring the countryside. And as any wronged spouse feels, eventually they've had enough. And the countryside now has another suitor. It's called Rural Reaction. And there is deep strategy behind this, which is to force the Conservative Party and the Labour Party to start to think about what the views of the countryside are, to instead of just playing for urban animal rights activists who are the armchairs warriors on Twitter, they're going to have to think about what the views of the countryside are instead. I am seeing over the last 9 years working in political lobbying, time and time again, that there has been a failure to bring any science to bear in dealing with very tender matters of animal welfare. They've just been used as cynical, shameless devices to win votes. The issues I've been working on over the recent months have included fox hunting, where we got 103 vets to co-sign a letter to DEFRA saying there needs to be scientific research on how we look after foxes. I've also been working intensely closely on the question of dog e-collars, where here we've got the issue of how do we train dogs not to attack animals like sheep and rabbits and so forth. And the use of e-collars on them has been a contentious issue for years. DEFRA thought back in April this is a way to win over votes, and hundreds and hundreds of dog owners thought differently. They wrote to their MPs, said enough's enough, and now DEFRA is on the run of that, and they are determined to, by supporting the Rural Reaction Party, to show that DEFRA should never touch this area again. Trophy hunting, now there's a nice controversial issue. A long time ago I went to a college in Oxford called Brasenose College, and there at this college was a chap called George Monbiot, exactly the same time as me. And George is on this issue one of my best friends, because George has come out and said that trophy hunting is really important for the survival of species in Africa. And it's not just George, it's hundreds of scientists think the same thing. Even Michael Gove, in a previous life, like 3 years ago, said that trophy hunting was really important for the survival of these species. Now, because of the gutsiness of these scientists, and because of the good men and women of Fleet Street changing sides on this issue and now supporting trophy hunting, the government has been backed into a corner. This legislation has failed in the Lords, and I think that the government won't try this again in the King's Speech. I think that there's a lot of soft opinion in urban areas about these issues from people who frankly haven't looked at any science, often because there is no science on fox hunting, no science whatsoever on this area. So the people who are really motivated on these issues are in the countryside. Now they can express their motivation at the ballot box, and politicians have to wake up to that. And this is not just a question for the Tory party losing marginal seats at the next general election, seats it can not afford to lose. It's also a question for Labour as well, because if Labour continues to pursue policies without science, then they will be rechristened the spiteful party. I have friends in many political parties, and we talk about these matters, how well Rural Reaction will do. And the average view we have is, say, 2 to 5% of people will vote for a reaction just because it's on the ballot paper and because they're fed up countryside voters. If we have a really good campaigns in particular constituencies, strong candidates, then I think we'll do better than that. But the key thing here is not about winning seats. It's around shifting the debate so that the big parties now have to consider rural voters. So there has been 20 years of failure on this issue. There have been, after the Countryside March, what has been successful for people in the countryside? Very little has been successful, and now we're getting to the point where, at long last, we have the ability through rural reaction. We've got that ability to say enough is enough, and the parties will wake up to that, because if there's one thing politicians care more about than anything else, it is their jobs. And this can shift who holds those jobs, and it could even shift government on a very tight election. So it will wake Westminster up. No longer will they be patronising to all of the countryside. They'll have to take the issues very seriously.
Would you consider folding up just before the election and saying, OK, we'll give our votes to the Tories in return for concessions?
Never giving up. This is a perpetual sword of Damocles hanging over Tories and Labour and SNP, saying that if you want countryside votes, you have to take these issues seriously. We will be supremely tactical about saying where the interests of the countryside are in terms of where we stand candidates. So if the Tories don't want them to be stood up in a whole bunch of marginals, then we could stand candidates in Lewisham and Hackney instead. There are so many options in this, but if the Tories are helpful, then they have a chance that we might be persuaded to stand our candidates elsewhere.
If you are in the Manchester area on Sunday the 1st of October 2023 and you'd like to go to the launch of Rural Reaction, email huntingkindinfo@gmail.com.